How's it going, everybody? This is the Nitty Gritty. My name is Chad. With me is Leonard. And this week we are going to be giving you a new edition of Segment Surgery. Basically, what this is, instead of a match where we review it, this is a segment or a promo, something that's not just wrestling related or in ring technical wrestling related. And we review it and go over it and talk about it. And this week, we are going to be covering something very interesting that probably not a lot of people remember. And it inspired me because I was listening to some episodes of a podcast I had downloaded for a while now that I was, hey, I should go back and listen to this stuff finally. And it was when William Regal had a podcast. I think it's called Wrestling Friends or Wrestling with Friends now with Matt Kuhn. But at the time, it was called Gentleman Villain, and it was William Regal's podcast. So I was listening to this, and Regal mentioned Hogan at one point, and in my head, I immediately went to, I wonder if those two ever faced each other. Well, sure enough, they do have a history, and it ended up being an interesting, little blip of a journey. And that is what we're going to be talking about. William Regal versus Hulk Hogan. And the reason it's a segment and not just a random match review. I was about to say stupid match review, stupid questions. Anyway.
Yeah, we can start doing stupid matches. There's all those out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of so this segment or the parts of it took place on April 29th, 2002. So this did not occur in WCW when the two would have crossed paths. This occurred during Hogan's, second coming in the WWE. This is when he returned to the red and yellow. He was the undisputed champion at this time. If people recall, he had defeated Triple H at Backlash with the help of The Undertaker. And so this is leading into the match at Judgment Day, I believe, between Hogan and The Undertaker. So, Leonard, before I sent this to you, well, not before I sent it to you, when I sent it to you, did you remember any of it?
No. So first of all, you mentioned this to me. My immediate guess was that this was like a random episode of WCW Saturday Night from like
Right.
94, 95. And you said no, it was like Raw from 02. And I did not remember this at all. Was I watching the product at the time? Yes. Did I care that much about it? No. I had actually kind of forgot that Hogan had won the belt again at this point. When he comes out with the belt, I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. He did win the title for a brief period during this period.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I was very surprised by this. And I know we're going to get to it. But I will just say that I was kind of disappointed with the outcome. But no, I had no memory of this having happened.
Yeah, so if people remember the Undisputed Champion era, in my opinion, I viewed it as, and I was watching very avidly at this time. I was, in college, but it was the fact that Hogan was back and they had Lesnar, and it felt like this was the most stacked the roster could be at the time. So the fact that Hogan was back and he was like being pushed as a main event guy, and by the way, Vince didn't really have a choice in the matter. Like if this was during the era that Hogan would come out and get like ovations through a commercial break. So like, he was hot at this time. The crowd wanted him to return to the red and yellow, and that's what happened. But I viewed the Undisputed Championship era as basically hot potato with the title because it felt like every pay-per-view somebody new was champion. To me, I viewed it as like they're trying to make as many stars the undisputed champion as they can before they split the titles back, just so that they can say, The Rock was the undisputed champion, and The Undertaker, and Hogan, and Lesnar, and it felt like they were trying to make as many people champion as they could during this time. But yeah, so I was surprised that this was from a Raw in 2002. But what prefaced the match was a promo from William Regal, which is fantastic. It
Yes, it
really,
is.
really is. And it makes what they do in the ring that much more disappointing. Basically, he's
It does.
surrounded with Hulk Hogan memorabilia. He has an
Mhm.
episode of Rockin' Wrestling, the cartoon show, playing as it starts. And he basically does a great Regal promo about how he doesn't understand the obsession with Hulk Hogan. And it is very British and very hilarious, but it's also a good, serious promo when he wants it to be as well. It just shows how good Regal is on the mic, so to speak. So, Leonard,
My
what?
favorite line is, "Why would you worship a man who prances around like a 50 pence tart and feather
Yeah,
boas?" That's the best line. And you're right, it walks a nice line between humor and being serious, and I kinda wondered how much of it that Regal believed, like, how much of that is a shoot brother, the way he felt, about Hogan.
yeah,
But it was definitely when I watched the segment first, I wanted to see the match. Like,
yeah,
I was like, and the fact that Regal mentioned we'd never been in the ring before. Um, I mean, they played everything up, I think, right to make someone. I don't know if it was in retrospect now looking back, but I think even at the time, I think the average fan would want to see Regal get his ass kicked. So I think this was a great way to build to the match.
right, exactly. It was a great way to build to the match, and up until they actually engaged in physicality, I was like more and more excited about it because in my head, I was like, one of the best chain wrestlers that there was is he doesn't wrestle anymore is William Regal, and I was like, but Hogan in Japan did chain wrestling, like so
Yeah.
he can do it. So in my head, I was like, wouldn't it be fantastic to see Regal try to do those things to him and then Hogan kind of out of the blue do some of that stuff back to him. To me, like they would have more chemistry than I think people would give it credit for.
Yes, definitely. Hogan in '02 was past his prime,
Very
but
much
he
so.
wasn't decrepit yet like he was
Right.
in TNA. Regal, I mean, he had so many renaissances in his career where he would go up and down. I think '02 was when he was on the way up again. And, I've mentioned I'm doing this long term, like fantasy wrestling league, and I have Hogan. And anytime I've got Hogan in there with like a technical wrestler, I have him bust out the Japanese stuff.
Yeah.
I have him do an Inzugiri and like a belly to belly, and I have him bust out some crazy stuff when he's in there with like like I've got like an early Jericho. I did a Jericho Hogan match where he busts out the Japanese stuff. So
That's
I
awesome.
don't think he would have here, but good lord, would the fans have gone just crazy if
Absolutely.
he would have.
And by the way, we're adding decrepit era Hogan to our Fever Dreams list for sure.
Please do. I think that's TNA era Hogan is
Yeah.
probably decrepit
Um,
era.
so the stuff in the ring starts out with Regal inviting him to ringside to have a cup of tea, which is fantastic. Like, so everything
Brilliant.
we've seen so far is amazing.
Yeah.
And you
And
think,
they both sell it well. The
yeah,
way that Regal invites him down, and Hogan's like, what is going on here? But then he does it because he kind of wants to see where it's going.
yeah.
Yeah, they both
And
sell it great.
no one like plays to the crowd like Hogan would do. So it's all very funny. And then Hogan out of nowhere attacks him, and they do a lot of stuff around the ring. But then the match abruptly comes to a halt because the Undertaker comes down and interferes because that's the main event of the pay per view coming up. And so there really isn't a match at all. And I was so disappointed, and which is why initially this was going to be a random match review.
Yeah, because
And
we
then
thought it was a match.
it turned into a segment surgery because I thought it'd be fun to talk about. And but I was so disappointed because I was like, why would you have this promo and all this build up just to have them not do anything at all? And like this is what WWE did and still does that drives me insane. They
Mhm.
will promise you the moon and then they will not deliver in any way. And people were just like, oh well. And I like this is one of those situations where it was like, this could have been, even if it was a 5 minute match, they could have done a lot with 5 minutes. And
Yeah, I think you make this the main event. I don't know if it was. Make it the main event, make it for the title, hype it the whole show, give it 10 minutes altogether, so 3 4 minutes for the entrances, maybe you get 5 to 7 minutes for the match, and just let it breathe on its own. And I guarantee you that even if it wasn't a great match, people would have remembered it.
absolutely.
Yeah, and what we got here, I did think the brawling around ringside was fun. This is definitely an example of Hogan as the babyface doing heel stuff, because
Oh yeah.
he's the one that throws the tea at Regal and upends the table. Regal did nothing.
Yeah.
And then they're in the ring for, I don't know, like a couple seconds, and then the Undertaker jumps Hogan, and I totally tuned out after about 30 seconds of the beatdown.
Yeah.
I was kind of putting down my final thoughts, and I was like, "This is still going on," and it was just a boring, boring beatdown. It was not good. You would think Undertaker beating down Hogan, okay, that's all right, but it wasn't. It was. This was so much nothing after the T spot that it angered me.
Yeah. And like looking back at this, the pay-per-view Backlash to Judgment Day, like it really, like when you look at it and you watch the main event of that one and the main event of Judgment Day and all this, it really makes Hogan look weak, because Undertaker, the only reason Hogan won the title against Triple H was because Undertaker interfered, and
Yeah.
Undertaker walked away smirking and smiling because he would rather face Hogan than he would Triple H. That was the point of that. And then, of course, at the next pay-per-view, the Undertaker beats Hogan.
Yeah, so he was right.
Yeah, so it was
He
like
was not
basically
wrong.
just, it was the most obvious transition champion storyline without actually saying it. But hey, Hogan was champ in 2002, so the fact that that happened at all is kind of crazy. But yeah, I mean, this was an interesting time frame for WWE, and it's a fun era for me to look back on. Because I was having a lot of fun watching, because they had a lot of up and coming stars, and they had a lot of older guys as well, and so there was like a nice mix, I think, at this time. And you're right about the Undertaker beatdown. There's blood involved, and it was just kind of, it was what it was. Um, but yeah, so we almost got a good Regal versus Hogan match. It would have been cool to see it happen, but we will not see it because both are not wrestling any longer. So
I don't think we'd want to see it right now today in 2024 anyway.
no, no, definitely not. With one guy who has a crippled, not crippled, but a bad neck, and the other guy that has I don't know, 12, 13 back surgeries at this point.
Yeah.
So yeah. But this was a fun little jaunt down memory lane, and so let us know if you remember it. Share your thoughts about it, and please hit the like button and subscribe to our content. Every little bit helps. Check out our other videos as well. Stupid question, what's that card, and random match reviews. Our full length episodes, and we're also available wherever you listen to podcasts. So for Leonard, my name is Chad, and we will see you next time.